I hope you're ready for some ill logic. Last time we went over our Week 1 battle against Jared and his Cincinnati Ursaring. Please go check out that video first if you have not done so already, as we went over the Teambuilder and the battle in which, spoiler alert, the Buffalo Boufflant secured a 1-0 start to the season with a very strong 3-0 victory. This time we'll be going up against fellow undefeated player SteveChuck, coach of the Waterdeep Wobbuffets. We've got the team breakdowns, the team building, the battle, and the post-match interview. Timestamps will be in the description. Steve is, of course, one of my best friends in the league and a very good battler, having won Season 1, last season taking us to a very close 3-0 victory back in Week 1, and then making it to the semifinals and finishing 3rd overall. I think it's a super good team this season too, maybe even the best in the league, which could be evidenced by taking down the other finalist from last season in Week 1, a convincing win off the back of his Lycanroc and G-Max picks. But let's get into the team a little more in depth, shall we? He's got his first round Cinderace, the aforementioned Lycanroc Dusk, Scyther, Flygon, Rotom-Wash, Skuntank, Venusaur, his G-Max pick Garbodor, my previous season's probable MVP in Aegislash, Eldegoss, and Sylveon. This is a super scary squad top to bottom, with amazing hazard removal, great speed tiers, great type diversity, and a stacked squad up top, with 2 tier 1s and 3 tier 2s, each of which I think is a great value. Cinderace doesn't have Libero access in this league, and his Garbodor can't hold an item, but that didn't seem to matter much Week 1. So as I mentioned before, the speed tiers are super good. There aren't any particularly wide gaps to take advantage of, though the speed doesn't go below 60. Maybe between the Flygon and the Rotom, but really not much to take advantage of here. Has also got a bunch of priority too. The Cinderace, which outspeeds everything but the Dragapult already, can carry Sucker Punch for it. Along with that, Skuntank gets Stab on Sucker Punch. Lycanroc gets Accelerock. Aegislash gets Shadow Sneak. Heck, even a first impression from Flygon or a quick attack from Scyther can hurt. The low tiers are okay, though I'm not a big Eldegoss fan at all. The G-Max pick afforded him lots of higher tier picks, but Garbodor isn't the most threatening mon to sweep, though it does have very good coverage that I need to be wary of. 3 poison types is pretty notable, and of course I have no Psychic type to take advantage of it, unless I were to put that onto Savali. That plus an Aegislash makes it for a very good matchup into Fairies for his team overall, though I don't suppose I need to have a Fairy this week either, as Savali is my only option for that. The biggest strength of the team, in my opinion, is the straightforward ability of things like Lycanroc or Sylveon, combined with the sheer versatility of things like Aegislash or Rotom, which make the high-tier picks nearly impossible to deal with. So how does this team do against me overall? Again, I think Eldegoss falls flat, hard. Grass coverage is all it's got, while things like Vikavolt, Colossal, Dragapult, even Sneasel just take full advantage of it. Scyther isn't great here either, though Swords Dance Boost could help its competency a little bit. Dragapult and Sneasel outspeed it and murk it, and things like Colossal or Magnezone will take hits from it all day long, even at +2. Skuntank's kind of a cool pick, honestly, with Dark moves being pretty good in conjunction with, say, Flamethrower, so it has the ability to Toxic most of the team. However, I should be able to switch around it pretty easily, and I have several solid answers to whatever it throws at me. Venusaur is next on my list, as it faces similar problems to Eldegoss while being more susceptible to easy ground coverage, and not being able to do enough to any of my big threats to be justified in bringing it. I wouldn't be too surprised if it makes an appearance, but compared to the best 7, it just doesn't match up. I found it very tough, actually, to pick just one of the remaining 7 to leave off of his team this week, but if you pressured me, I guess I would say the G-Max Garbodor. It's a bit odd for him to leave all of his poisons behind, and I don't even have a Psychic type to take advantage of it, but I also don't have a Fairy for him to take advantage of. Anyways, Garbodor doesn't have too much power behind its punches, relying mostly on coverage and the bulk provided from G-Max to withstand multiple hits. If I can predict him properly, I should be able to make it through the G-Max without any issues. So that's going to leave the 6 I expect him to bring, and they're all so good. Flygon is the only lower tier pick I'm expecting to come, solely for its excellent typing against me. My only Dragon Resist normally is Magnezone, who gets buffed by an Earthquake. Ground also resists rock coverage, and he's going to be ready for that. He's also immune to the Volt switches for my 2 electric types that I touted last week. I know he's aware of how good it is overall for my team. I think he'll bring the stop to it. Sylveon is a great defensive Fairy type who could provide some big problems for the team if it's got the full suite of Wish and Heal Bell. He's seen me flirt with status in Week 1, and certainly last season when I burned multiple important threats of his, and spoiler alert, I've got a couple more statuses packed for this week. Many of his mods lack reliable recovery as well, and I'm definitely worried about sacrificing too much to get Chip on his team, only for it to be healed back up by Sylveon. Lycanroc Dusk got 3 KOs in his first match, showing its prowess and reason for being banned recently from UU. The fast close combat is so strong against my team that it's overall weak to fighting, and Accelerock has great complementary coverage and priority. If close combat from base 110 speed is good though, then a high jump kick from base 119 is even better. Cinderace has dumb good coverage, including Fire, Fighting, Bug, Poison, Dark, not great, especially considering its own speed and power, as well as the ability to boost up with Bulk Up, or turn the hazard game around with Court Change. I know very well how good Aegislash is, having used it in my previous 2 seasons, and I'm very scared this week. It's got so much versatility between stall breaking, choice sets, setup sets, utility, an amazing type combination too, that could render many strategies moot by simply existing. Finally, Rotom-Wash is so scary good. Its resistances are very useful for the team, with its only weakness of grasping and uncommon type coverage, and belonging in stab only to my Tangela. That plus a potential Will-O-Wisp to neuter all my physical attackers could make a very bad time for my switches. So I still think I have some answers to his big threats, of course. Colossal is not one of them, unfortunately, as he has way too much hazard removal, too many faster threats, and type coverage that just destroys the poor Coal Engine. I briefly considered a cool Intimidate Stoutland set to better neuter all the physical attackers Steve has, and to help show off its bulk a little bit, but decided that the set was ultimately a bit too gimmicky and inconsistent to work this week. It doesn't deal well with the additional fighting coverage, and doesn't quite have the power to make it worth it in or out of sand. Sneasel's actually a cool bring too, with Ice Shard to outspeed almost all priority, and not many physically defensive threats, but it's difficult to bring in, and he has too many resistances to the typings I'd be looking at using with Sneasel. Mantine is pretty good defensive utility again, like last week, but ultimately struggles against most sets from the threats I'm most worried about, primarily Aegislash and Rotom, and doesn't do enough while it's in anyways to justify it. Finally, well, it pains me to say it, I'm going to be leaving Tangle on the bench this week too. It would have been cool to try and bring it maybe even every week this season, but unfortunately it just doesn't do enough to stop most of the physical attackers that could come, particularly things like Cinderace or Garbodor, and it falls prey too easily to the special attackers like Sylveon or Special Aegislash or even Rotom. The former of which can take advantage of it to wish up, and Rotom could just Volt Switch out of it. That's going to leave us with these 6, 4 returning members and 2 members making their season debuts. The name of the game this time is focusing on those main members I'm expecting them to bring, and finding appropriate checks and counters to them. I feel like I don't have as much flexibility this time around either in team building, so the goal is to figure out his sets as quickly as possible and then send out the appropriate answer. Additionally, I would love to get a pick or 2 somewhat early, as that should open up my potential sweepers significantly, and I'll touch on that as we go through each team member as well. I think it makes sense to start with the most straightforward set and straightforward member in Magnezone, the League's kill leader after 1 week. This time instead of Specs, we're slapping a Scarf on it to outspeed everything but Cinderace, most notably Lycanroc. Flash Cannon and Volt Switch, of course, along with Thunderbolt for a stronger move once or if I have Flygon out of the way. And the final slot is Toxic, a nice move for the possible Flygon and especially Rotom-Wash switch-ins. Analytic again gives me a lot of damage, even though I outspeed everything I need to aside from Cinderace, he gives me more damage on the switches. A couple monsters to stand out as need to go are, aside from Cinderace, which outspeeds me, Flygon and Rotom-Wash, as Flygon is immune to electric moves and Rotom's 4 times the resistance to Flash Cannon practically makes it immune. Once one of them goes down, I can very easily spam one of the other stab moves, and that's definitely a key for my success this week, I think. I kind of get to decide if I want to use electric coverage or steel coverage early in the game. I feel like steel makes a lot of sense early to chunk down that Flygon, as I'm able to bring multiple members weaking it to Earthquake, and particularly a lot of members weak to mixed Flygon. So speaking of Flygon answers, I have a whole 1 reliable switch into Earthquake and physically offensive Flygon in general, and that is going to be the physically defensive with a Rocky Helmet, Vicful, with max HP, max defense. I can punish some conservative U-turn plays, among other things. His team is mostly physically offensive, so I like the utility this can provide. With these stats, Lycanroc can Accelerock me for only about 1/3 of my health. He takes the Helmet recoil damage, and gets snuffed out by an Energy Ball, which is also super effective coverage for the Rotom-Wash, if I can get in against it neutrally as well. Otherwise, Bug Buzz and Volt Switch are pretty standard, and Roost is cool if I can use this to repeatedly switch in. It's one of my physical walls / checks, which is important with all the possible physical threats he's got at his disposal. Vikavolt most of all wants Sylveon gone, and can't do much against Cinderace aside from switching in on non-fire moves maybe for some cheeky chip damage. Some of the Aegislash sets hurt very badly too, particularly Specs, so it's important to find that out as early in the battle as possible. Speaking of physical walls, instead of Tangela this time we've got something with much more offensive potential and a different way to recover health, and that is going to be the debut of the G-Max Sandaconda. Again, fully physically defensive to switch into threats like Cinderace or Lycanroc. EQ is obviously amazing coverage for the team against many of his top threats in particular. It threatens the OHKOs on things like Cinderace, Lycanroc, and even Aegislash, while doing great damage to the G-Max Garbodor and the Sylveon. It looks amazing, but what coverage should go with it? I figured the best neutral coverage would actually be Dragon, mostly because I can Oko the Flygon and deal good damage to Rotom still on the Switch. It gives me a move to use on the Switch at all, which is why I could like the ability to use Outrage to kind of pick and choose if I think the Rotom is low enough. I could just click the Outrage, get the 2-turn hopefully, and then be able to move onwards. It gives me a chance too to take advantage of the Coil, which could be very interesting. It gives me the opportunity to set up all over him, especially once the Rotom-Wash is gone. Rest, of course, also allows me to heal up off any statuses that he may inflict on me, and be able to heal up the health, of course. The main culprit that needs to go is absolutely Rotom, as if it burns me while I'm in Gmax, I can't exactly recover that. Once it's gone, though, Sandaconda has an absolute field day, even more so if Flygon is gone too, and it lets me spam EQ. So maybe I should go over the possible Rotom check, if it seems to be this good against me. Well, we've got maybe the coolest heat set of the week this week in Tyranitar's debut. We've got a mostly special T-Tar because I fear Rotom's burns and Aegislash's King's Shield, and this lets me be effective even in their faces if those are the sets they're running. Dark Pulse is obvious stab coverage, and it hits the Aegislash. Ice Beam specifically for trying to catch the Flygon on a switch. Toxic likely to catch switch-ins of that or something like the Rotom as well. And finally, we got Heavy Slam, which even with no investment and a minus attack nature, Oko's Lycanroc most of the time, which is hilarious, and does about 75 to 85 to max HP Sylveon, which is also absolutely hilarious. Max Speed F because I really don't have any other options for my Rotom switch in, and I want to be sure I can tank those Hydro Pumps effectively between the bulk from Sandstorm and the investment. This is entirely a lure set anyway, so I can try and play it off like there's a middle ground play to catch a Volt Switch, while instead staying in and putting a timer on Rotom, while chipping away with Sandstorm too. Toxic is my main weapon on this set, and if he tries to heal it off by going to Sylveon, I can stay in easily to Heavy Slam the Sylveon, punishing it and not allowing it to wish if that does happen. That's kind of the main goal of the set, I suppose. The set just doesn't appreciate basically anything that isn't Rotom or Sylveon, but I'm hoping that I can just catch him off guard with the set and have T-Tar do the job I'm giving it. So my other tier 1, of course, is Dragapult, and we're actually rocking a Choice Band set this time around to do so much damage. I figured that I would like a way to break through with his team, especially things like Rotom. I was also very impressed with how little I would take from a neutral Sucker Punch or Accelerock from Cinderace or Lycanroc respectively. Anyways, Dragon Darts immerse most things on his team aside from the 2 resists. Once Sylveon is down, it becomes a nice spammable option. Steel Wing is an option to hit Sylveon in a similar manner to Heavy Slam, where just getting it in once is a big deal to help keep it down. Additionally, if the team is chipped down, Phantom Force becomes incredibly spammable, especially if Skuntank isn't present, and I'm in against Mons without priority. With Infiltrator, Phantom Force is going to hit no matter what, and is a cool answer in front of something like Aegislash without Shadow Sneak. U-turn is, of course, solid momentum, and is actually great chip if he swaps in something like the Rotom as a safe middle ground play. As stated before, Sylveon needs to go to be sure I shine, but priority users, Scarfers, and probably Gmax and Garbodor would be good to get rid of too. After that, it's time to rock. Finally, you may have noticed I've got a Silvally that I'm bringing, and I've actually got a pretty cool item this week in the Poison Memory. Poison Silvally provides an easy switch into Sylveon and a cool stab option that still hits things like Rotom neutrally. There are a few resists, things like Flygon, even Lycanroc, Garbodor, Skuntank. Aegislash is the big issue, as it is immune to my stab move. Enter Crunch, of course, now, which can at least break a max HP sub in shield form, though obviously have to watch out for King's Shield lowering my attack. It cannot poison me with Toxic, though, which is a big deal in trying to beat that defensive set. Parting Shot is another valuable tool I plan on using against Aegislash, especially choice sets, or something like Autotomize. Even reducing the Shadow Wall damage to let me go into something like Magnezone could prove invaluable, and catching, say, Flygon on the switch could let me go into maybe Vikavolt or Sandaconda that much easier. Finally, the third Toxic user on the team is one that cannot miss its poison, and can threaten things like Rotom or Flygon with its longevity issues. Again, these are 2 core pieces that I really want melted down for something like Sandaconda to be able to go to town, so weakening them early with a Toxic is huge. Aegislash is obviously the big issue that Silvally wants gone, as are Garbodor and Flygon. Other than a potential Rotom burn, this Silvally can then really go in. So, that's the team we've got for this week. Again, once we break through one piece, maybe many others should start to go down too. Rotom falls, and Sandaconda just kind of wins. Sylveon and Aegislash falling allows Dragapult to win. Rotom or Flygon go down, and Magnezone absolutely goes in. That's kind of the idea behind things like the lure Tyranitar as well, along with the other options like the 3 Toxic users to help break down those walls. This could require some good predictions along the way too, but I feel actually quite good about the team I've prepared. Let's head into the battle. And it looks like we were spot on. All 6 members brought were the ones we were prepping for the most. Very nice. I've already got Dragapult picked out for the lead, ready to switch out Flygon or Rotom in case they're scarfed, in which case I have easy answers to those threats. He does lead off with a Flygon, which means out to Vikavolt I go. I'm going to eat a Dragon Claw. It only does 20%, and I get recoil from the helmet, which is a nice start. No Life Orb recoil. It's not banded either, so it's probably Choice Scarf. That makes a lot of sense considering the Dragon Claw coming in over Outrage. I do think I psyched myself out a little bit, though, in considering a different move coming, because this should be a super easy Volt Switch, but scared of the Fire Blast, I just click Buzzy Buzz, and I'm not really sure. Even if I was worried about it staying in and doing something, Volt Switch was such an easy play, because I either have to hard switch expecting a fire move, or stay in and Volt Switch. And I did neither of those things, so that didn't really make much sense to me at all. Would have been nice, although we do get to see Sylveon doesn't have lefties, which is kind of interesting. Silvally is going to be my play every time, though, because Silvally Poison is here for that. And it does have Light Screen, which means that it's probably Light Clay, interestingly enough. Multi-attack does knock that thing out. However, I figure that Toxic would be a much safer play in case you want to try and go into something else, like the Flygon potentially, or the Rotom that did come in. So that's huge. I really, really like getting this thing on a timer. Plus, seeing the dual screen set means Sylveon probably does not have Heal Bell. It's probably going to be dual screens, Wish, and Hyper Voice, if I had to guess there. I'm a bit worried about a possible Will-O-Wisp, so I think it makes a lot of sense to go into the Tyranitar here. I'm going to set the sand, eat a Volt Switch, reveal my bulk, and I'm going to stare down an early Lycanroc, which is kind of interesting. A curious decision, but with a Sandaconda waiting in the back, I think I'm pretty good with that. I'm going to take minimum damage from the Droll Run. It's a pretty cool middle ground play, actually. And I make another very timid play here. I'm pretty disappointed by this, to be honest. I know Rotom is the switch for him every single time, but I don't make the switch out. I stay in. This should have been an easy Dragapult play, Tyranitar play for me, but I just didn't click the button. In comes the Rotom, and I coil up instead. Which it was the better play if we wanted to Flygon, but if Flygon's a physical attacker, he's not coming into me anyways, so not going to do anything to me anyways. So that was kind of a bad play in that regard. I don't have a great switch, but I do get to see from all this residual stuff happening at the end that he does have leftovers, which is kind of interesting. A little less scared, so I can go into the Tyranitar. I can eat up that Hydro Pump super easily. I wasn't really fearing Will that much, I guess, because the Shed Skin. If he knew about Shed Skin, maybe Dragapult would have been a cool play there to eat up a hit and then be able to just claim something potentially, or at least U-turn out as a cool mid-ground play onto something. But I mean, Tyranitar is bulky enough. Obviously, it ate that super well. I actually considered a weakness policy set for Tyranitar because of how well it eats up things like that and the Hyper Voice, but we're just going to keep chipping away the Rotom, I guess. I thought this might be an interesting time to swap in the Magnezone this time. Ideally, if he stays in, I can Flash Cannon, but instead he does Volt Switch out. It's only 15%, but it's not so fine that he gets to bring in the Flygon again for basically free. I think I know as well as him that we're both Scarfed here, and EQ is the obvious play, which makes Vikavolt the obvious switch in. But knowing that, I decide Sandaconda seems to make sense as a middle ground play in between those options, and does pay off as he eats a Stone Edge. Steve does get a crit in there. It doesn't seem like much, but let's check in on that a little bit later. Anyways, here comes another bad play with Sandaconda. It's obvious he can't stay in here. He cannot stay in, right? Because we know this thing is Scarfed. It wouldn't have stayed in if it was Scarfed, among other things, right? So a double into Magnezone, I think, would have made a lot of sense to me. I think I may have been frustrated by the amount of switching I've been doing here, and felt like I needed to get some damage on the board. Still, I get a little bit of damage because I decided to max Wormwind here, but he goes in the Aegis Slash and takes minimum damage from it. It's nice to be a little safer from a physically offensive variant, but well, no need to overpredict on this next turn. G-Max Sandblast with a crit going through Protect's going to do 29%, another 12 from the Sand Tomb effect. This time there's no way he keeps it in, so I can max Wormwind again, get some more nice little chip on the Rotom there, bring it down to 47%. And G-Max is over without accomplishing all that much, about half of Aegis Slash's health and a little bit of the health on Rotom. So where's that leave me? I can't do much of anything to the Rotom unless I stay in Outrage, and I really cannot afford that. This thing is a nice defensive wall for later, too. So I decide to try and maybe go Zone on the switch, but I eat a Hydro Pump. So again, Tyranitar probably just the better play again. But, you know, I ate a ton of health, but here we are, and Magnezone with the Scarf is in, ready to outspeed. So are you ready for another bad play? Because at this point, I have two options, right? I Volt Switch and I eat a Flygon, or I click Flash Cannon and risk getting O-Code, but I put a good amount of residual damage on the Rotom, or something else. considering that I would be boosted by Analytic. Some things may have just gone down if he switched out and with the Flash Cannon. This is potentially my worst play of the match here, honestly, because for some reason I hard switch into Vikavolt. I'm really not sure why, because I could have gotten a hit off with Magnezone that I just... Anyways, Sylveon is going to get up another light screen on my very obvious Volt switch into my very obvious switch in of Silvally Poison. I hope you're ready for some more bad plays, because Multi-Deck straight up OKOs at this range. The only risk are pretty much Flygon or Aegislash. Heck, Toxic would be a safe play. We would still hit this thing very well, very effectively, but I'm aware I shouldn't have Heal Bell. And instead, I chicken out again and I Parting Shot. It helps a little bit, I guess. And Tyranitar is my only real option right now, as he tries to send off a Wish. So this is another big moment here. I cannot let this Wish get out to something else. You see the damage on these things? This Aegislash at 45%, this Rotom that's poisoned down at 45%. So, do I predict one of those to come in? No, I'm not going to make a fool of myself. I want to force him to make the play instead of me making those bad plays. And I'm going to click Heavy Slam. And the tech move pays off. A KO picked up on Sylveon, Wish Effect nullified, and a KO to the big boy with a little bit of leftovers recovery coming in too. A huge moment, honestly. Things were starting to go a little downhill there after several poor plays. Sylveon going down opens up a few doors for me. Most notably, Dragapult clicks Banded D-Dart so free right now. That Aegislash is only at 45%, and that's his only resist. So that seems super safe for me. We'll touch on this a little bit later. Especially Silvally's usefulness, which has gone down dramatically. For now, it's a Lycanroc that is switching in. It's threatening a KO with close combat. While I do fear that, I think I feared setup a little bit more. So my answer is going to be Sandic Honda, which avoids chip from Sandstorm and provides an active threat. Close combat is doing 31% to me. And this is kind of an interesting roll here. If he's Adamant, that was a low roll. And if he's Jolly, that was a high roll. So I decided to take the risk and stay in for the rest to tank this and Flygon better later on. Though in hindsight, Dragapult or Silvally were actually very good switches here. So was it a low roll or a high roll? He picks up the KO. Turns out he was indeed Adamant, and it was an 80-20 roll in his favor to pick up the KO on those two close combats. Funny story, remember that extra 5% from the Stone Edge crit? Yep. Without that, it would have been an 80-20 roll for me to survive two close combats instead. Stone Edge does have a high crit chance, but also only has an 80% accuracy. That's the break. Maybe I should have just gone into Silvally anyways and gotten whatever chip I could. Then again, it wouldn't have been a good idea to risk him setting up Swords Dances while I struggled to KO him. It's fine, it really is. Compared to me making better plays earlier that would have led to a better situation, this is nothing. Either way, I think Dragapult is my switch in here. I already said Dragon Darts makes for an easily spammable move, especially as I'm getting the feeling that Lycanroc might be sashed here. And Dragon Dart's doing a ton of damage, a crit doing 25% on the second Dragon Darts, not that mattered. Maybe in conjunction with the other crit from the GMAX Sandblast, but even then, this still looks like it's in Dragon Dart's range here. Aegislash, I don't think it's going to have Shadow Sneak, considering that it's a King's Shield set. And I don't want to overpredict or anything on the turn that the Sandstorm goes away. So I'm just going to Dragon Darts again, pick up this KO as Flygon is the easy switch, of course. It makes far too much sense. And he pretty much has to go for the Dragon move, honestly, to ensure the KO. So into Vikavolt I go. Pick up a little bit more Rocky Helmet to chip damage, and it is getting a little bit low. So I have a couple options here. I could Roost here. It would have been pretty nice to be able to do that, maybe to tank some stuff later on. But ultimately, I decided to Volt Switch. I think I was just disappointed in not switching earlier, and in my last battle, I chastised myself for roosting up my Mantine instead of taking a KO on a big threat. So Volt Switch seemed to make enough sense to me. So we're going to be able to Volt Switch out on the Rotom that comes in, bring that down super low, and it makes a lot of sense for a Dragapult to be able to pick up a KO here as well. I don't see him saving this thing, so grabbing the KO with Dragon Darts is super easy. Probably misplay here too, honestly. I could have done something like U-turn and gone to maybe the Silvally Poison, which again isn't doing much of anything right now. It's becoming less and less useful as more and more threats go down. But I think that's probably fine for now. Cinderace is going to be the switch, and I have another decision to make here. Dragon Dart's just KOs, but Sucker Punch damage could kind of suck here too. Maybe I wanted to stay out of Flygon's Earthquake range. I'm not really sure. I did the calc ahead of time to ensure I could survive the Sucker Punch, and if you look at what's on my team, my physical wall that wasn't weak to fire is down, and nothing else outspeeds this thing. So I'm not really sure why I'd switch out of this, but Tyranitar does resist potentially incurring fire or dark moves. I don't know. The burn really doesn't matter. I wasn't planning on clicking Heavy Slam at any point anyways. Then on the high jump kick, obviously I could have tried to go back into Dragapult because there really wasn't much anything else that Cinderace was going to be doing there. But I'm really not sure. That could have been easily taken advantage of. I could have gone out into Silvally. I could have swapped in the Dragapult. I'm really not sure. All this does was cost me a T-Tar. The worst part of this, by far, is that I just end up going back into Dragapult anyways. And I'm going to click Dragon Dart, so that seems like another super big misplay. Maybe that was the worst play of the game, I'm not really sure. But Dragon Darts is really the only thing I have on the team to KO this thing anyways. So what have I been hesitating about this whole time? If I do this anyways, then now what am I going back through it? I feel like I was just all over the place with these moves, And now he gets to click the Sucker Punch, which Dragon Ball takes, and gets the KO back with D-Darts at least. It brings him down to 2 Pokemon, which is pretty nice. A little bit of chip damage there onto me. And now he brings in Flygon. We get... This is probably the biggest misplay of the game on my end. I didn't... Even compared to everything else, at this point this game is still so winnable with these just 2 Mons left. I did not really look at things from my opponent's perspective at this point. That being that Flygon is the win condition, and I undervalued Vikavolt specifically as a ground immunity, while overvaluing Silvally, which I still haven't brought in after the Sylveon went down. It's an easy play. Sack the Silvally right now if he Earthquakes, it doesn't matter. It lets me go into Vikavolt afterwards and just click probably Energy Ball, or even just Volt Switch would be even better to be able to make sure that the Lycanroc goes down. Otherwise he'll have to find a way through the Magnezone too if he tries to click EQ. I can't let Vikavolt go down because he has to click Rocks or Stone Edge for that, and he has to click Earthquake for Magnezone right now, as well as the Silvally. Silvally doesn't do squat though. At the very least, he can break Lycanroc Sash. I can Parting Shot out. It lets me tank a hit or something. The easiest way to lose right now is to swap in Vikavolt on a Stone Edge, as that's the only ground immunity and the only thing stopping Flygon from destroying the rest of the team with her EQ. However, yeah, my bad. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. Although I don't think I really recognized it until I was making this next switch. That was so big. Magnezone comes in. It's going to, of course, be able to 2-hit KO the Lycanroc with Flash Cannon. Good proccing the Focus Sash, which he did indeed have. And Magnezone is the last thing left is the Flygon. I just don't outspeed it because it's Scarf. So we still don't have 100% confirmation that it's Scarf, but come on, the way it's been played, it's pretty obvious that this is Scarf. So at this point, I really only have one hope because Magnezone goes down and in comes the Silvally with full health still. So I don't have Ice Beam tacked on here, which would have been really cool. But I feel good about the move choices I made anyways. Multi-attack crunch, 3-hit KO from this range. Really bad, I know. So there's only one chance that I have left to do anything about these EQs. I can tank an EQ, which shows that the damage is actually adamant as well. And I Parting Shot out into the Dragapult. So what is this going to do to me? With the minus attack, Dragapult has a 3 in 16 chance of surviving the incoming Earthquake before KOing back with Dragon Darts. So, this is it. This is the culmination of those misplays. Sagging T-Tar for no reason. Sandaconda going down to a couple rolls. Sacking the Vikavolt at the most crucial moment of the game. It all comes down to a very bad chance on a bad roll on my end. The moment of truth. And I do not get it. I finally get punished for my arrogance. Dragapult plus Silvally pay the price in the 1-0 loss. My first loss on the channel, my first loss after an undefeated Season 4, and in the previous Singles League win Wooper Club, I won every playoffs match there too. So this is my first singles loss in the Wooper Club League since week, 8, 9, something like that, of Season 2, when I dropped a set to Joey and Monotype. Yeah, that long ago. GG to SteveChuck. Amazing game. Probably still going to be game of the season when all is said and done, I think. Though I know how that sounds when we have 7 more weeks of play left. I made a ton of misplays, but also several very good plays, and Steve, of course, played well too. He played to his win condition. He did everything very well on that end. Let's break it all down. So let's start with his side. What can I say about Flygon that it swept me at the end? He knew that when Sandaconda and Wigvolt went down, he could just win with EQ, and he executed that strat. Super simple, but remember just how difficult it was for him to break through the Sandaconda at all, considering that a max attack Lycanroc only did 34% with its strongest move against it, but he had some good chip on it, and I couldn't get off the rest. A couple repeated hits into Vikavolt, followed by me not finding a chance to roost, and that's a wrap. I was definitely worried about Mixed Life Orb Roost Flygon, but this seemed to work better to play around Dragapult, and of course Magnezone, being Scarfed. It makes me realize I should have been more prepared with offensive checks as well as defensive, maybe something like Sneasel even. Cinderace was really only used to play around the Dragapult, and if I had just clicked Dragon Darts, then perhaps things would have been different. I still wonder why I played around it so much. Perhaps a Banded Sucker Punch would have KO'd or something, but stacking T-Tar for nothing stings so badly. Again, I think the worst part of it was that Dragapult was the only thing that was going to KO Cinderace anyways, aside from maybe Silvally. So what was I so worried about? Anyway, it did its job, for sure. It took out 1 mon and a half, pretty much. Lycanroc was very effective in breaking for Flygon, and emphasizes something about Pokemon that I love, which is similar threats breaking down each other's threats. In this case, what I mean by that, of course, Lycanroc, a fast physical threat, it hits things with ground at fighting coverage, which broke apart the Sandaconda for Scarf Flygon, a fast physical threat that hits with ground coverage. So, you see what I mean? It's definitely effective. I love the ability for two things to just break down their own checks. Aegis Slash is next. It really didn't end up doing much, and it really wasn't a good or reliable switch into Sandaconda, which I found pretty curious. It was a physically offensive Sandaconda too, so maybe it's, I don't know, a bit more confusing. They're a physically offensive Aegis Slash, so I'm not sure how I was supposed to beat Sandaconda when it swapped in there in the first place. Even more curious, it had Shadow Sneak the whole time and then didn't click it on the Dragapult, which is interesting. Sylveon's Light Screen was kinda a non-factor. It maybe prevented Magnezone from destroying something. Maybe that factored into my decision not to click moves with Magnezone, but it was already unreliable trying to get it into the fight in the first place. Not sure how effective it really was, and then ended up dropping to the unpredictable Heavy Slam. I really can't fault it for that. It also stayed in on the Poison Silvally, which was strange, but if its only jobs were to set up screens and pass wishes, then I guess it was fine. Finally, the Rotom-Wash messed with my brain quite a bit too. Its unique resistances, immunity to ground. Zone, I didn't Flash Cannon with this around, like, at all. Sandaconda needed to switch out of it. I was scared of Will-O-Wisp the whole time. Hydro Pump did some damage too. Steve took full advantage of this, caused havoc with the Rotom constantly through the beginning of the match. On my end, Dragapult was easily the most effective tool I had, with Choice Band D-Darts marking everything in sight. Again, I think I poorly recognized that this was about my only tool for Cinderace, especially once Sandaconda went down, leading to the next Pokemon T-Tar to go down too easily, but otherwise I think Pult was very effective. T-Tar was such a weird pick with such a weird set, but it obviously was effective on Sylveon. Perhaps I should have been more aggressive with the T-Tar plays, but that's not a terribly big deal. I was hoping to bait in something and KO it, and frankly it did its job. It was also a good call making the Sandaconda fully physical, but I wonder if doing something like mixing up the coverage a bit would have been better. Maybe keeping Stone Edge just for the inevitable Rotom switch, or maybe putting Scale Shot on over Outrage as a chance to hit things on the switch a little more effectively. I don't know, it sponged up hits, but in the end it couldn't quite do it effectively enough thanks to the lack of leftovers the G-Max Mon must forego. Magnezone ended up doing very little, really only giving me the slight chance at the end of the match thanks to the Scarf being able to help it KO the Lycanroc, but it was mostly because I was scared to use its moves. I should have just used Flash Cannon consistently to pressure out the Rotom eventually, but I got scared for some reason and hesitated to do anything meaningful with it. Silvally was definitely the biggest misstep, maybe for the second week in a row even. It's probably because I'm doing a poor job evaluating what its role is in any given game, early, mid, and late. In this game it needed to be the sack for Flygon. Earlier in the game it was to force out the Silvally. Mid-game it was to force pressure by taking a hit and hitting back hard with a multi-attack or laying down a Toxic. Instead it just sat in the back, and even when it came out I never clicked an attacking move. That could very well have been the difference between a win or a loss, and I don't think I effectively used the Silvally prepared for the match. Finally, physically defensive Vikavolt was a great call for the match, and I think I used it well overall, but of course I would have liked to have found an opportunity to roost, and I wish I hadn't been so hesitant about the Volt Switch. In the end, I underestimated the role of my only flying immunity too, and gave up what should have been my win condition in Vikavolt. Strange perhaps, but ultimately true. That said, I think that should wrap it up for the extended post-game thoughts, so why don't we hear a bit of what Steve had to say after his highlight victory. And now we get the chance to follow up with the post-game interview with SteveChuck, my eternal Mr. Quality rival. How are you doing today?
I am doing very good.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So that was my first loss in the Wooper Club League in a good bit, not counting the last VGC season where I tanked. But we don't have to talk about that one. We can talk about this game, which was honestly such a blast, and we just want to go over the team a little bit. The Choice Scarf Flygon, the Boots Cinderace, the Focus Sash Lycanroc, Life Orb Aegislash, Light Clay Sylveon with dual screens, of course, and then the Rotom with leftovers. The stuff that you didn't bring, I kind of expected none of it. I think Gmax Garbodor was the only thing that I really thought might come. We want to go into your Gmax and why it didn't come this time?
When I was looking at your team and just especially your common weaknesses, and what I needed to wall, I really knew you have that strong Volt Turn core, so I wanted something to take Volt Turns and special bulk. So Sylveon and Flygon were coming. Um, your team generally being weak to especially a fighting ground rock. Uh, really thought Lycanroc and Cinderace fit well. Rotom for the defense, and honestly, Garbodor was more or less like the seventh mon on the list.
Sure, and that was kind of in the breakdown. It was like I said, the seven, maybe not Garbodor, but otherwise, I definitely agree. These six made a lot of sense. We spoke a little bit earlier on this, but the Flygon was Choice Scarf, and obviously that was the deciding factor in the game, being able to outspeed everything, as well as could have been my in at the very end. But to talk about the Choice Scarf Flygon in particular, I'd also mentioned that I was a little worried about a mixed Flygon, but you chose this to be your Scarfer for the week.
Yeah. I had considered doing a mixed set. Kind of worried about Tangela, honestly, in the physical bulk of
Oh,
it.
and
Although,
who isn't worried about Tangela? That thing's a threat.
but I guess Sandaconda more or less did the same thing, where it's here to just be a physical wall. And honestly, Flygon really couldn't do much to those.
Right.
Something like Fire Blast or Tangler, or I'm not entirely sure if what special, if it gets like Ice Beam or anything,
Right.
it
A
would be good
Draco
for.
Meteor would be pretty much the thing I was most scared of otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. That definitely was an option. But I mean, I wanted the U-turn for the pivots, Earthquake obviously for the stab and great coverage against your team. Dragon Claw specifically for Dragapult.
Sure.
And Stone Edge to pick up the coverage with Earthquake. So
Sure. The notorious Edgequake coverage does
yes,
wonders against just about everything except, ironically, of course, for Flygon itself. One of the few things to resist or be immune to, one or both of them together. The Cinderace being Boots makes a lot of sense. I didn't end up bringing any hazards this week, mostly because I was worried about it. But the speed stat, like that was the only thing that the Scarf Magnezone couldn't outspeed, and a reason why I didn't bring things like the D-Dance Tyranitar in the first place.
yeah, I mean, Cinderace's speed stat is great, and it allows me to, I can even invest some of the EVs in bulk. What was this spec? I think this was outspec just to outspeed max speed Sneasel.
Yeah.
Um, But the ability to threaten most of your team with the high jump kick and sucker punch for Dragapult. I mean, it was an obvious choice there.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense. Possibly could have done a little more to play around the high jump kick, but obviously the coverage is fantastic. Sucker punch was always going to be a worry. I was just happy to see that Dragapult could live it. So that's
Right.
a little bit far. Not having Libero obviously helped a little bit with that, but obviously he still puts in a lot of work this season. Speaking of work, though, too, the Lycanroc in Week 1 put in so much work, and this week just the standard 4 attacks Focus Sash set, but you were able to run Adamant this time around.
I mean, I ran Adamant last week too.
Oh, that's probably why I was able to get all those KOs, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean it has such a great speed tier, and the first two opponents I've had, there were no Pokemon in that under 110 till like 95 speed, so I don't need the Jolly Nature to give it the speed boost. It's able to outspeed everything it needs to with Adamant. You get that extra power.
Absolutely true. Except the Aegislash, which you have borrowed from me. I am giving up temporarily 2 seasons in a row for me with this, and now I pass it on to you. And an interesting Life Orb set with 3 physical attacks. Close combat obviously makes a lot of sense. And decided to invest in bulk. I see a max HP and the adamant nature there too.
Yeah, I mean, Shadow Sneak as kind of. I was worried about Dragapult just tearing through my team, so always get to have something to. None of my options one shot him. I think they're all two shots, but if you have enough things that two shot, it works out.
They switch it one too many times, and there's no longer an answer.
And then got the Fighting Rock combo, which hits almost all of your team super effectively.
Right. Yeah, fighting coverage similar to ground coverage to help with that edge quake combination. Rock, as you've already mentioned too, is just such good coverage against the whole league too.
Right. Yeah.
So Sylveon is dual screens. That I find very interesting. I don't really see much setup on the team either, but it did dissuade me from making a couple of special attacking plays, specifically bringing in Vikavolt earlier and such. Why the dual screens this week?
As I was looking at it, I was worried about if you went a little more offensive, just my team's durability. I knew Sylveon could handle the special attackers just fine. Rotom could handle the physical attackers for a turn or so. But I wanted to give myself the ability to take a little bit more. Have just more or less if you also went hyper offense and I had the kind of hyper offense core, just something to give myself the edge there.
Sure. And I think that synergized pretty well with what you're saying too, where like maybe a lot of moves don't OHKO, maybe they 2-hit KO, but now you have the ability to stay in, make sure you don't get OHKO'd, and pretty much turns 2-hit KOs into 1-hit KOs at the sacrifice of a little bit of HP.
Right.
For a team like this, I think that trade makes a good bit of sense. And then the final member, the Rotom, with Thunder Wave to slow things down. Probably if I were to bring in the Dragapult on it, that would be a pretty nice answer to it. And it was max defense anyways for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Rotom was definitely my physical wall that I was relying on here. Just meant to kind of form a defensive core with Sylveon. Thunder Wave to try and get on some of your faster, bulkier people, or even honestly any of the middle ones. Just get that chance for the paralysis and slow them down, such that anything can outspeed them.
Aegislash definitely stands out for one that could use that little bit of support to help outspeed that stuff too. Yeah.
Definitely Aegislash, and I mean Sylveon too. If it's anything that Hyper Voice is good on, so
right. Yeah, I mean, I felt like the Sylveon and Rotom combo was already something that I was very weary of, seeing all the recovery options for the Rotom, and I really didn't have many options, especially not bringing the Tangela. I didn't really have any grass coverage for it, and I thought this was probably the toughest thing. Looking forward to the match to break through. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the set overall. Going over to you, looking at my team, was there anything that I brought that you didn't expect, or something that you were really prepping for that didn't end up showing up for you?
I honestly was not expecting Tyranitar to come.
Sure.
I know you had mentioned with weather, with other trades happening and weather going away, that you were considering trading the Tyranitar in. So that was something I wasn't sure if it would make it, and under prepped for it because of it. Outside of that, I honestly ignored Sylveon. I was like, it's probably coming. Who knows what type it'll be? We'll figure it out.
You gotta get there when you get there. It's as long as it doesn't do too much to you, sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think there were a couple other things I definitely considered. The Tangle, as you had mentioned, for the Flygon potentially, but I just kind of thought the Vikavolt had a better overall matchup. Sneasel was also a possibility. I had definitely thought that Ice Shard would be a nice bring to hit the Flygon with. I felt like maybe you had too many resistances, or it just wasn't going to do enough if you brought in like an offensive threat on it, like Cinderace. Okay, I get a knockoff for 50%, and now something's dead, so I couldn't end up bringing that. I even had an interesting idea of a defensive Stoutland as well. I know you have a lot of physical offense, so I thought maybe Intimidate Stoutland would be a pretty interesting bring. But the thing just wasn't quite powerful enough to nab KOs. It didn't quite have the same kind of coverage like Tyranitar was able to provide here. So,
yeah, that was looking at your Tyranitar set and getting hit by that heavy slam during the match by surprise. that really, baited in some things to definitely punish them for
That
it.
was
So
tough to go. I feel like that was a pretty high roll on the heavy slam too. This is a minus attack nature. It still did that much. It was still able to do about 80% or so to Sylvan. It would just about OHKO the Lycan Rock, of course, with if the sash were broken on that.
right.
So that's kind of the idea there. But right, if there's anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up here.
I mean, it was definitely a really good match. Looking
I
forward
had
to
so much
probably
fun. So much fun. It was great.
look forward to probably playing you again later in the playoffs.
I
Probably
can
the finals.
I can anticipate that happening definitely. So again, I had a ton of fun. Steve moves up to probably number 1 overall at this point. Go check out the power rankings that I'm actually about to record pretty soon, I hope. But thanks again for doing the interview. Thanks for an awesome match. And next week we've got Chad and the Seattle Steamroller. So come back and check out that one.